Welcome to a very special crossover video. I have been dabbling in this new series about my existential crisis, but I've also been making several videos just asking my dad random questions, and then we find out they're not so random after all. They have a lot to do with the male identity, the male human experience. And that's important because so many of my viewers on my videos are male. And I think a lot of men don't have a positive mentor, positive father figure, whereas I did. A lot of my viewers don't. And I'm aware of that, and I think it's important to figure that out. With that being said, this is a special crossover video from existential crisis video to random questions I'm asking my dad into one. So just yesterday, I had explained to you, here's what I'm going through. And I'm sure people by this point have seen my other videos that I actually haven't. I've not actually made any of those videos yet, those existential crisis videos, but I will. But I filmed all these first. So I will release this after you had a chance to see some of the other ones. So even I haven't made them yet. That's interesting. These are like a pretty cool situation. So the deal though is, and let me just kind of say it out loud to you again, just to try to help you understand. So I'm 38. I have a great marriage. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I have a great job. I live in a perfect neighborhood, 2-car garage, fenced in. We live in the wealthiest county in Tennessee, so therefore the greatest school system we could have. I have a job where I'm respected, and also, and I'll let you Google this to figure it out, but in the United States, there's a certain amount of money that you can make that once you start making that amount of money, making more money will not make you happier. Making less money will, but there's a certain sweet spot. As long as you're making that amount of money, more money can't make you happier. And I'm in that. And so is my wife. We both make the amount of money to where your happiness cannot be affected unless you actually make more or less. So if I suddenly got another raise and made $10,000 more, that actually might make me less happy, because it goes back to how we're wired. We're wired to have struggles and therefore successes. I'm at a point now though in my life, not only I've got everything lined up and I'm not 40 yet, but also going back 2 years in time, I didn't have what I have now. Like, I was making nearly half of what I make for my salary compared to what I make now. So in a 2 years time, I went from a job where I didn't really feel respected at all and didn't have benefits or insurance or anything like that, to now suddenly I'm making nearly double. I have benefits, insurance, 401k, all these things. Now, so much of our income goes to just retirement at this point. That was not something I could have imagined 2 years ago. And even like 7 years ago, we were still in debt. Other than our house, we didn't have good, dependable cars. We still had like student loans and all that stuff. We're way past that at this point. And so to find such success in a short amount of time and still before age 40, as a man specifically, my wife doesn't relate to this problem, but at least she's understanding it, what I'm going through. I'm not anxious, I'm not depressed, I'm none of those things, but it's almost like I'm removed from the human experience because I don't have anxiety or fear. And I know a couple weeks ago we made that video where we took the Jeep out in the mud and we were talking about how like it was sideways, the water's coming up, like, oh no, like I was fearful in that moment. But like, that's part of my crisis, is that it took a Jeep Wrangler stuck in the mud a couple times. How am I gonna get this thing out? For me to even feel that human connection again, like, oh yeah, because most people have fear and anxiety. I've got zero of that. Like, and this isn't depression. I think that's what is confusing about this midlife crisis thing. I'm not depressed. I'm happy, but I feel removed from the human experience because I've experienced so much success in a short amount of time while I'm still young. So we were talking about this. You can't relate to that though. Like, that was never a thing that you thought like, wow, what do I do now? I've got the second half of my life, and what am I supposed to do other than let my good life play out? Mm-hmm. That's not a familiar concept to you.
No, I don't remember anything like that. I just, you have those goals like you were talking about, when I was married and started working, I realized I really didn't have a skill. So what job would I ever get to really, get to that point in life where, okay, this is comfortable, I'm happy here. So that's when I started the trade school, went to trade school. And welding is a good trade, and it can pay well, but really not in this area. And then after like 10 years of it, it's really old. I don't want to do this anymore. And then this other job came open in quality control, which, even anything I do, I just really put all I got into it. So it wasn't long until, then I was promoted to the supervisor over that department, and, more money. So we got to a point I thought, okay, like you said, more money. Yeah, it'd be nice to make more money, but I was making enough money for us to be comfortable and happy here. So that was done, and then the point came to, okay, now we've outgrown our small house. It's time for a new house. So I kind of had the thing, a challenge that, hey, I'd like to build my own house. So that was the next challenge. We did that, built a house.
And I have to point out that we were discussing this morning, you were 38.
38.
When that happened. So not to say that's part of crisis, but maybe somehow it kind of ended up keeping you from having that, because you had a definite goal, and that's, we lived in this small little house to now moving into a 2-story house with 2,000 square feet, a couple acres, 2-car garage, all this stuff. Going from that to this little house that was barely 1,000 square feet with like
800 and something, I think.
Yeah, it's like, it's considered
it was 1,000.
It's actually considered a tiny house by today's standards. Like that could be on a TV show. Like that's the house that I grew up in the 80s. We moved into the new house in 95, but I didn't know any different how small that was compared to doubling the size of that new house. But it could be that was one more reason you didn't have a crisis, because you had a pretty big goal. That's to move into this new house, and even when you build the new house, you're still having to do things to it and dress it up.
Yeah.
So even this shop being part of it a couple years ago when you built the shop, like it's all still an ongoing project. And I do want to point out too, this thing that's interesting, a parallel that you and I have is we both worked doing the same thing for a decade or more before we got switched out of it. So for you, from age 21 to 31, you were a welder. That's not an easy job. That's an understatement to say that's not an easy job. For 10 years. And for me, I had my degree in English, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that. I just knew I was supposed to get a degree. And then I went to a temp agency, and they're like, hey, we got this new company that opened up around the corner. And they're like, yeah, it's kind of like marketing. So I show up thinking I'm getting a temp job. Really, they're like, no, we're going to hire you full time. And it was recruiting truck drivers, which doesn't seem like anything special. But I worked at that company, this small family company. And then after about 5 years, they put me in charge of retention, a new department they were going to do. It was almost like trying to eliminate the need to recruit as much if you're able to retain more. So I was put in charge of that and given that responsibility, managing that department for 5 years, until ultimately the company basically kind of shut down that branch. And then I ended up getting this job by a Fortune 500 company for recruiting truck drivers that pays almost double. So I was like you in that sense. Put in a good decade or more of your life in this thing, and then suddenly, okay, here's your next thing in life, and it's a lot better than what you're used to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah. I mean, and how old would you have been at that point? When you were early 30s. You were like 32, I think, when you got the new job, and then a couple years later, built the new house.
Yeah.
Maybe what kind of puts me in a different situation is that my wife also works full time, and she actually makes more money than I do. Like a good amount more of the money, even though I make double what I used to. So there's a lot of dollar signs in our life that like suddenly hit us. Whereas we've been married 11 years. The first part of our marriage was like, okay, let's just pay off the wedding, because the wedding costs about as much as a car. And then we have all these other debts, and then we have to find dependable cars. And so much of our marriage was just like, get out of debt, we got to get to these points, And then we're having kids. Okay, well, that's going to financially set us back. Oh, we have to know how to be parents now. That's stressful. We got to figure this thing out. Whoa. Oh, now we got to buy a new house because we got to live in the right county, because when you're in Tennessee in the Nashville area, if you don't live in the right county, then you live in a bad school where there's, are they going to be bringing guns to school? What's going to happen? So now we got to move to this county, live in the right county, do other things. And finally I moved in a house 4.5 years ago to where now it's already increased $100,000 in value. So like I was telling somebody, they're like, this is your midlife crisis? What's the problem here? But ultimately, it makes me almost feel removed from the human experience, because I don't have depression, anxiety, fear, really so much of a struggle anymore. I just have to maintain what I have. And so has that ever, even now, I mean, you're nearing retirement, you haven't had kids living in the house for a long time, but even at any point, have you had a moment to think that on your own without me saying it?
Mm-hmm. I would say that, somewhere through the years is like the worry of the stress of getting to a point that you want to be in. And yeah, but like now, I'm like you, there's no stress, there's no worry, and like you said, getting ready for retirement, and we're starting to think about that, plan for that, to get ready for that. And that probably brings a little, is like, okay, well, should I actually retire? Do I have enough money to retire? Is that going to really work? To do that. So you got that a little bit, but it's really, not that much.
And I think that's another place we connect in real time, because we're going with Charles Schwab for our investments, and the lady's like, you guys need $2 million to retire, based on assuming that you're not going to have Social Security, which you get Social Security. They keep telling us, our generation, we're not going to have it. Mm-hmm. So, but even then, I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's still 30 years from now, and based on what we have, even in our savings and 401k, like at this rate, we'll have the $2 million by the time we retire. And it's just $2 million. Well, yeah, but we're going to be working for the next nearly 30 years to get that, to retire on that $2 million. But I'm not worried about it. Like, it's just coming out of my check, and I'm not. Instead of going into savings, yes, we got savings, but our retirement or our investment is almost like our savings. In closing though, I think what's interesting about this is, I think it's a new phenomenon that men my age can go through this crisis at this age. And that's what my research has shown. Men are going through midlife crisis at age 35 to 50. So the age is becoming younger now, because you can get farther quicker now if you play your cards right. And that's happened to me. But it's almost like in some ways you and I are in the same frame of mind, despite the 24-year difference between our ages and where we're at in life. You're near retirement, and I'm almost feeling the same way as you do, even though I'm not even close to retirement. But mentally, I have more of those boxes. I have the same amount of boxes checked off as you do, just a lot sooner. So there is this sense of like feeling like I'm just floating in outer space, looking down at the earth below, thinking, yep, everything's good, but so what am I supposed to do now? Mm-hmm. So I think that we're largely in the same place in life, mentally, psychologically, in the male experience. But the struggle or the problem, perceived issue, is that I'm too young to feel this way. And it's causing me to redirect how I'm envisioning the rest of my life. So I guess even though you can't relate to ever really having that early crisis, where you're at mentally is maybe largely where I'm at now. And to that way, you can relate to me.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
All right. So a 13.5-minute video that we figured that out. Your thoughts and comments and beliefs belong right here in the comments section.